Hey, what's up, everybody? Jackson Callum of First Class Business here, and I am so excited to talk about joy right now. I have a client, and the client is with it's joyally.com. Okay, they're all about joy too. And here's what's cool. Normally, it's the business who receives the testimonial from the client, but on this occasion, I have to give a massive testimonial and shout out for my client, Cheryl Lynn. All right, she's been working on these marketing materials with me to get her brand going even further, to put it in high demand, to get the sales process in place for the corporate package that they're putting together to help companies with growth by manufacturing joy within the culture of the company. It's really cool what they're up to. But here's what happened. She filled out this workbook that in my 8 years of using this workbook, not one single entrepreneur has completed the entire thing alone. And I have worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs and hundreds more of entrepreneurs who couldn't hack it, who couldn't get through the process. She did the whole thing in probably a matter of 24 to 48 hours, and she did super well on it. So I was really happy about that. I was like, I got to go on live and give her a shout out. But I also have an opportunity to talk about something that is super near and dear to my heart, which is the subject of joy. Um, Joy is an awkward word for a lot of people. Let's go ahead and change this little ticker down here in the bottom. I want to ask you, why do you think joy is awkward for others? What have you seen in your life? Why do people not talk about joy more often? I remember in middle school, we were doing this activity where everybody was supposed to come up with an adjective to represent their name. And the people so one of the names that was having a hard time was anybody with a J name. And everybody was trying to think of what is the J word that describes me. And in the class, anytime the word was discussed as a class, like jubilant or joy or jolly, like everybody felt really awkward and tense. Nobody really wanted to gravitate towards that. Even those with the J name, it was like, no, like that's not really me. I don't know what that is. I don't know how that feels. So, what is it? What is it about joy that makes it such an awkward word? Why do people um, struggle to feel it and embrace it? And this is an open question. I'm going to give my ideas because why? Well, I've had the opportunity to find it. So we're going to go into that too a little bit. But if you have an idea of why people aren't feeling joyous or why they avoid it, then by all means, definitely share with us. So I want to talk to you about, how do you find more joy? How did I get there? This is a difficult path. It very much depends. For me, it's a difficult path. For Cheryl, it's amazing, and she's super good at really facilitating and teaching that. So I definitely recommend checking out joyly.com because she can supercharge you and get there faster. For me, I came from a background that was filled with a little bit more anxiety and stress, and there was some depression in there. And I didn't know that as a young kid. I didn't know the darkness that was there. It was just kind of part of my reality. So as I progressed through life and I met people who were happy or who were having fun, I had a really hard time relating to them. I had a really hard time understanding why they should be my friend. I grew up competitive too. So here I was, struggling with a sense of self confidence that I didn't know I was struggling with. And when I would meet positive, uplifting people, I also felt a separation from them. And I didn't feel like I could relate. I didn't even want to relate to them. I don't know if anybody else listening to this has felt that, where you can't feel comfortable around people who are joyful. But I grew up with that type of a feeling, really not understanding it fully, and really bouncing around the ideas of happiness and joyful experiences, but kind of living outside of myself during those moments and experiences. So again, how do you find more joy? How do you get yourself into that boat? I think that this answer for me is not super easy to answer. That's why, again, I recommend talking to Cheryl and her team at Joyly. They have this really cool thing called the Chair of Joy, where they help you experience it in 60 seconds. All right. Now, I don't want to pretend to do this meditation practice. As like any certified coach, I'm not. But I do recommend checking out what they're doing to help you with the process. In my longer term sense of finding joy and pulling it into my life, one thing I had to really accomplish too was finding a way to be at peace with myself, at peace with my past, and accept that this life is meant to guide us as a journey to greater things in our future. And whether that is 20 years in our future or 2 minutes in our future, I didn't realize that I had more control over that mechanism, over that reality than I did. And so it took me a long time to get to where I could ultimately call joy into my life on command. And that's what I love about what she's doing. Let me see if I can share here on my screen. Let's switch views here. I'm going to share Joyly and what they're up to so you can see it. So if you happen to be in a position to where you know you could benefit from more joy, I highly recommend checking out the 5-day Chair of Joy challenge. It is super simple. It's a 60-second challenge that helps you learn how to sit in your chair of joy, breathe, and do a little bit of breathing exercise, then move into the thinking process and of imagining that you're in your moment of joy and then actually taking the time to feel it and embrace it, so that you can pull yourself out of whatever other type of feeling. Let's see here. Let me stop sharing the screen now. Whatever type of feeling that might be overwhelming you or might be on your chest. And let's go here to the comments. So Eric here, I focus on the many ways. Let me put your comment up there, Eric. Appreciate you chiming in on this. I focus on the many ways I've been blessed and how grateful I am for the people in my life. Man, I love that. Sometimes when you're rambling on these, and you're thinking through your thoughts, you got to the element of centering yourself, right? And Eric, you just centered me, so I really appreciate that. Gratitude is huge, right? So it's incredibly important. I don't know how to have joy without having gratitude, and that means like for the simplest things, and you can be silly about that. You could be like, wow, like how can you be grateful for this pen, or you can be deep, profound, and reverent about the reality of how cool that is. I was thinking earlier today about the inventions we have in our life, and how grateful I am for the different types of inventions that make my life so much easier, especially in a first world country. We have access to so many things that we take for granted, and that ultimately allows me to be happier with the circumstances that I have, any problems I'm going through. It gets my mind off of the problem and onto the reality of the benefit. So, Eric, thank you for jumping in and sharing that. Um, let me put this banner up here too so y'all can consider other elements of joy, some of the questions that come up about it. Like what is joy and how does joy work, right? It is a science, guys. This emotions and logic, and I know people say left brain and right brain. Well, guess what? You put them together and it's the same brain. So that they both exist, and your heart and your brain, those are connected too, by the way. There's a whole system that does that. So how does it work though from a scientific standpoint? I'm not an NLP genius. That's not what I do. So I'd be curious if anybody wants to chime in and provide that type of insight. Um, Again, why do people fear joy? I think there's many reasons that could exist for that, and some of them are more surface level reasons. Right? I don't want to eat because I'm not hungry, or I don't want to eat because somebody said I overeat. I'm affected by that. There's lots of reasons that could be factors, and it's important to figure out what your reasons are, and then start gravitating towards more and more depth, so that you can get the answer you need to unlock the door, perhaps, of the room that you may be trapped in. So, what's the difference between joy and happiness? Let's talk about that too. A lot of people would say, well, it's the same thing. I once had a friend, still have the friend, but when we were younger, we were at a party we probably shouldn't have been at, and he's known for laughter and being funny, but it was always so easy for me to see that this individual struggled with depression and sadness to an extreme degree, and I noticed that about a lot of people in the comedy space too, that they struggle with a true sense of happiness, and so I think he was asking me like, why are you always so happy, or something like that, or like, why, just asking me about who I am and how I work. And I remember saying something along the lines of, there's a difference between happiness and having fun. And I remember in this moment of his life, he's like, it's the same thing. He didn't really want to hear that. And I felt bad that I didn't know how to break through to him, because I knew how badly he was struggling with a sense of happiness, really feeling great about life and how to help with that. So in that moment, I didn't know what to say. But I do know there is a difference between joy and happiness and having fun. And when you can take time to just study those concepts, go to YouTube, look that type of a concept up instead of, some like cat meme or whatever. Look up something valuable that will help you build these characteristics in your life so you can feel better. It's amazing what you can accomplish just from taking the time to study a virtue on a platform that maybe that's not always thought of as providing that type of a resource. What holds people back from experiencing joy? One of my virtual mentors, and Taylor Welch, I'm really grateful for what he taught in relation to this. Somebody asked him how to find success, or what's the greatest key to success for in his eyes, and his answer was environment. And I thought that was incredibly profound, especially after his definition. He said, a weak person in a strong environment will often outperform a strong person in a weak environment. I was like, wow, that's incredibly profound. So sometimes our environment isn't necessarily a physical environment either. Sometimes it is, right? So if you have physically difficult conditions and you're super strong, but somebody is on a platform of strength and in a good position to lift, they might be able to outlift you because of the environment, the physical environment they're in, right? If you are surrounded by people in your life who are loving and grateful and service oriented and trying to achieve things for the greater good, then you're going to be supported in a way that doesn't come from perhaps being surrounded by 5 to 10 people who are toxic in nature and who are critical and who are trying to destroy you and keep you from thinking of your dreams. And I say destroy, it's a harsh word, but if somebody's telling you like, nah, you'll never do that, or, nah, you can't accomplish that. Well, how do you think you're going to do that? These doubtful critics that exist, the negative Neds and negative Nancys. If that's what you're surrounded with, then you got to find a way. I would recommend to get out of that environment, to get into an environment, to make new friends, people who care about you and uplift you and support you. And that's so hard to make that choice because oftentimes what happens is you make the choice to change, but you stay in the environment and everybody sees that change and they're not comfortable with it because that's not a reflection of who they are and how they do things. And so if you stay around that clan of yours that wants to bring you back down to who you were, you're going to have a really hard time escaping to the greater virtues that you seek in life. So those are some of my thoughts on joy and happiness and the difference between the two and how to achieve it. I highly, again, recommend joyly.com. It's a completely free program as far as learning about this joy concept and how to ultimately incept joy into yourself. I don't know if that's the exact word you should use, but it's really cool to be able to sit back, do that breathing exercise, and mentally just prepare yourself to visualize what makes you happy, what truly makes you joyful, and hone in on that. Because the more we ignore it, the less likely we are to experience it. But the more we dive into it, the more likely we can gain the strength. Now, I will make this one caution very clear in relation to this. Um, any change in your life can be disruptive, right? And you got to be careful with exercises like this. You got to become self-aware of recognizing that your dosing needs to be appropriate, right? If you're dealing with grief and the pain of losing a loved one and you've never worked on joy before, then this could be a very hard time to balance that act, right? Just like if I were to have surgery on my arms and then I were to try to lift the bar when I'm doing a workout, I might drop that bar on myself and crush myself, and really hurt myself physically. Well, the same truths exist with our emotions. So based on the fragile nature of our emotions, or based on our strength and confidence, our emotions, that can also have a determination on how well we access these different emotions. So again, I am more the student than the teacher in relation to these emotions. So I wanted to put this video out there to see what types of comments I'll get throughout the days, what types of advice we might find, and just share a little bit of my personal journey with the topic and the process. Another final resource I'll share in relation to this, and in relation to a joy experience. I read this book several years ago that really unlocked um, my ability to get centered around happiness and joy, really no matter what types of trials I'm facing. And it's called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. It's a really, really interesting book. I'm not a scientist, I can't vouch for the science behind it, but I can tell you that as I read the book and came across these concepts of how emotions correlate with each other, and how if you have certain emotions, negative emotions, they will trigger and stop you from experiencing the positive counterpart emotion, kind of like water extinguishes fire, for instance. So in the book, the author talks about how when you're in the womb of your mother, even and you're experiencing life that's going around you, if you have parents who are fighting, or you experience trauma in that area of your life, you it may alter your DNA completely. It may alter your DNA and your rDNA to a degree that you become out of tune with who you are. And as I read through that book and read through those concepts, I was like, wow, this is really profound stuff that I'd like to understand better. And then she gets to this part in the book where she's again correlating the different emotions against each other. What was cool is just learning that correlation of sadness and depression and anxiety, and how they block your channels of happiness and and fun and laughter and joy, helped me to start making changes in my own life to where I could start eliminating my negative feelings and move towards activities that drove those positive feelings into me. And like any plant in life too, and the law of the harvest, with time, just consistently contributing to that and striving to experience the positive emotions in my life, that plant grew stronger and stronger, until well, I shouldn't say until. I've got a whole journey of life ahead to make sure that I center myself around happiness and joy and peace and goodness. And I just feel incredibly blessed to have been given that type of knowledge and the invitation to pursue it, and now to be working with a client that's full-time focus is on helping 8 billion people find joy. It puts me in this like super like funnel of like, hey, let's really figure this out and let's find more of this in life. So happy about that. Let's see here. Eric also says happiness is temporary. As soon as you have it, it's going away. Joy is eternal. It's always with you. It's profound, man. I'm glad you find that truth to work for you. And maybe it does work for everybody. Again, I like to speak for myself alone, but I'm really glad that it helps you, find centeredness, balance, and happiness and joy in your life. The again It also comes down to definitions, right? Let me, before I finish, so I speak Spanish and English. I would say fluently, in both languages. And one thing that I've learned in the process of teaching others and helping others study and grasp the concepts is that we have very unique definitions of words. All of us, our paradigms are what drive our definition. I had a teacher in college, one of the few semesters that I went, really fascinating teacher. And he taught about how there's this word in German called the Zeitgeist, and the Zeitgeist is the world perspective, right? The world paradigm, how the world sees things. So you've got the main definition that's out there that you're kind of supposed to use, if you will, if you want to get in a semantics battle. But you also have our interpretation of that word. So you have two people using the word thanks, right? And our perspectives on whether that word is appropriate, whether it lacks etiquette, whether it's a true expression of gratitude or not, depends very much on how we grew up and how we associate with the word. So I'm not a fan of like getting into semantics battles and over defining things, because our language is often more limiting than it is opening to the abundance that exists. But I certainly appreciate the fact that everybody's got their, again, own way of kind of interpreting how these different languages come together and how these words come together. uh, a good example related to joy in Spanish is the word hope, right? So the word hope in English is the word hope. I mean, you got to like figure out your own definition of that. But in Spanish, it's so interesting. It's esperanza. And esperanza also has a verb associated with it, which is so to hope is esperar. But esperar also means to wait, right? So when we hope, where it's and a lot of people in English use the word as a negative. Like, man, I really hope they get here. Like, I hope they hurry up and finish the dishwasher, fixing it or whatever. We use it as a complaint often, when in reality, the intent, I think the true intent of the word was actually a virtue and was meant to help us cultivate a healthy sense of waiting, knowing that good was going to come, but it wasn't going to come immediately. And so in Spanish, I love that esperar means again to hope, but it also is very clear. There's no difference between the word hope and the word wait. They are one and the same. And so it's funny how we learn things in our own language that we then determine are absolute truths, when in reality all of our languages are broken or fragmented versions of what we're trying to express about our own experience. And again, I'm also not a linguist, so I don't have these concepts completely developed. I can only share my wisdom and truth, as it correlates to my life. And ultimately, I have confidence that my experiences will guide at least one or two people who listen to these to a greater sense of purpose, a greater sense of confidence in themselves, and on this occasion, a greater sense of joy and how to find it. I hope you have a fantastic day. Thanks for tuning in, and go check out joyly.com. I'll see you later. Bye bye.